Okay, I think we're live. I just need to, it hasn't come through. There we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. I don't normally come to you live on what day is it? Thursday night at like 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I don't normally come to you live at this time, but I'm super, super excited to have a special guest here that's going to really dive deep into a topic that gets talked about a lot. So welcome. As you know, my name's Donna Kay. I am your ADHD health practitioner, and I'm so, so excited to have Katie Kimball with me today to talk about this very, very important topic of picky eating. Now, Katie is the national voice of healthy kids cooking. She is also a blogger. She has a TEDx talk, which is amazing. And I shared it in the group. If you haven't seen it, you need to look for it again. She's a former teacher and a mum of 4 kids. Totally take my hat off to you, Katie. I struggle with 2. And she founded the Kids Cook Real Food e-course. And it was actually recommended by the Wall Street Journal in 2020 as the best online cooking class for kids. Now, her blog, Kitchen Stewardship, helps families stay healthy without going crazy. As we all know, that can happen sometimes. And she's on a mission to connect families about, around healthy food and teach every child to cook as part of the kids' meal revolution. She has also been trained in the SOS approach to feeding by Dr. Kay Toomey. And one thing I absolutely love about Katie is that she gets it. Okay. She has 4 kids of her own, and she has taught these kids to eat and actually enjoy their vegetables. I mean, seriously, that's amazing. And at one point, she had a kid that wouldn't eat any green foods. She had a kid that had an egg allergy and a dairy sensitivity kid as well. She still has one who won't let foods touch each other. So she speaks as someone who understands the total struggle of picky eating. Now, if you've ever thought to yourself, I just want my kids to eat what I make, then you are definitely in for a treat, because Katie has some great tips to share with us today. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much, Donna. It's a treat to be here. Absolutely.
I am so excited, and we have so many questions for you. I know that I've got so many families, not only inside my program, but also inside this Facebook group that we're presenting in, that have picky eaters. And so I want to just maximize the time that we have together, and I'm going to dive right in. And I've collated a couple of like the most commonly asked questions that get asked of me about picky eaters. And the first one we have is that, this is from one of the members in our group: my kid only wants to eat variations of cheese and bread, like mac and cheese and pizza and pancake. I think that's most kids, isn't it? And so what do they do in that instance?
Well, this is particularly tricky since one of your first steps, of course, is to ditch the gluten and ditch the dairy. So now I'm sure some parents are like, but that's all the things. Like, that's all the choices. So sometimes, especially for our stress levels, we have to take some baby steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
slow and steady.
Yes. So I think first it's good, like, for our parent brains to understand what's going on. I know Donna talks a lot about the inflammatory features of dairy and gluten. And actually, if your kid is really, really drawn to those foods, it can be a sign that they are sensitive to them, that those foods are bad for them. I'm sure you've talked about that a lot. And so, like, we want to start with our own like gut motivation of, okay, like, I believe that these foods need to go, but what is left? So for a time, you may need to leave those foods in. But I really advocate for letting our kids get hungry, first of all. So really, really important to make sure that snack time is not too close to dinner. And I would say, I always tell parents at least 90 minutes away, if not 2 to 3 hours, especially if you have kids who are in middle to upper elementary, they can handle going a little bit longer. We want to hit that sweet spot where they're getting hungry, building a proper appetite, but not getting hangry and melting down. Right.
Yes,
so we get a good snack. Yes. So we want a good snack that satisfies, but doesn't fill up. And then if we can get the kids coming to the table hungry, what you want to do is lead with your ACE. And so put out something that's not cheese and it's not gluten, that's not bread, preferably vegetables, and just trying to get our kids to, encounter those vegetables, make friends with them. And we know that the first bites of food, like brain science says, they actually do taste the best, which is good, because if the last bite of food tasted as good as the first bite, we'd keep eating forever. Right. So it's a good thing, but we can.
That's amazing. I actually didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, think about it. If that like last bite of your pasta or something, gluten-free pasta in a restaurant tasted as good as the first bite, you would literally just probably like overeat forever. And so it's important. It's an important evolutionary principle that our taste buds sort of get dulled as the meal goes on. Those first bites taste the best. Take advantage of that. Put the vegetables out first with no other options. The kids don't have to eat it, but if they're hungry, that's the option. And so that can be like step one to expanding the palate, to expanding the repertoire, so that now they have mac and cheese, pizza, pancakes, and broccoli, or mac and cheese, pizza, pancakes, and carrots. Like, we've got to get some more options, because a wider variety means your kids are going to be able to eat more. And then, of course, if you have to cut gluten and dairy, you're going to want to start looking for some ways to shift, right? There are half a bajillion pancake recipes that are gluten-free and dairy-free, right? So I would say start with the pancakes, because sometimes pizza gets a little, you can find a really bad gluten-free pizza crust recipe. It's really hard to find a bad pancake recipe, like even if you tried. And so I would start with the pancakes and switch to gluten-free, but then still allow them to just have those pancakes. But ideally, once we cut the gluten and dairy for a couple of weeks, that almost near addiction will start to go away, and they'll start to be able to open up their palate, make friends with other foods. But it's kind of a whole process. And so that idea of like wanting only cheese and bread is very classic. It's very American kid, and it's very fixable, but it's a lot of steps. So that's just kind of the first two that I would recommend you take care of.
And I think that they're fantastic tips. And, it is also about just taking that first step. And, if you just gave that vegetable, the first time, every day before their meal comes, think about that. You're creating a habit. They're going to get used to that. But if you don't do it on a regular basis, it's not going to work. They're going to be like, oh, mum will do that once, and then don't worry, I'll kick up a fuss, and then, she's not going to do it again. Valerie in the Facebook group is saying that makes total sense. And that is a great tidbit. So thank you for that. That was awesome. Now, the next question we had is, I can't get my child to eat any meat other than sausages and chicken nuggets. Any suggestions?
So one of the principles that shocks parents that I teach all the time is that picky eating isn't about food. In almost all cases, picky eating is either about the relationship that's happening at the table. It might be about some sensory processing. It might be about, the ADHD brain just quite simply getting distracted from eating, or it could be an oral motor issue. If you notice that your child is only able to consume like the opposite of real meats, right? Real meats would be like grilled chicken breasts, steak, like things that aren't basically pre-chewed. Think about that. Those store sausages, those store chicken nuggets, they're almost pre-chewed meat. So why is your child gravitating to pre-chewed meat? Because it's easy, right? We are human beings, and we're not necessarily lazy, but we do want to preserve our energy. So if we have an easy path, we take the easy path. That's not your kid's fault. That's okay.
Never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it very well could be pointing to the fact that chewing is difficult, and that chewing is a skill. Straight up, chewing is a skill that your child never quite learned properly. So there could be some like weak tongue or weak chew, or maybe like there's this motion called tongue tip lateralization. Think about it. If you just like right now, like pretend you're putting a Cheerio on your tongue and like move it to the back of your molars.
Oh, it's
actually really complicated. There's no word in any language in the world where your tongue has to do that. So it's nothing. You can't say like, oh, my child speaks fine, their tongue is fine. Chewing is a 32-step process. And so if your child is having trouble moving the food to the molars, they can't chew meat. You can kind of fake it with chicken nuggets. You can kind of mash it on your front teeth. You can mash it against the top of your mouth.
Right.
But if you can't move it to your molars, you can't eat real meat. If you have trouble swallowing properly, you can't eat real meat. So it genuinely could be a chewing thing. It's something to watch for. It's something, you know, you might even be able to watch your child and say, let me see you chew, you know?
What do you do?
maybe
Like,
figure it
what do
out.
you do in that instance? If you do notice that it is, a chewing issue, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you actually may need some expert help and like a feeding therapist or an occupational therapist to
Yeah.
relearn how to chew. And I
Mhm.
mean, it's mind blowing. I was watching your face, Donna, and you were like, "What?
Yeah,
Like, are you
exactly.
kidding me, Katie?"
Yeah.
So it's just kind of it's one of those signs. Now, it could also mean that your child only had easy to chew foods because
Mhm.
they didn't like the hard to chew foods, and so you didn't push it because you had 5,000 power struggles already, right? So
Totally. You got
like
to pick your
no,
battles.
yeah. So like no guilt there. It could be that they just need to work up for it. So if they're only eating sausages and chicken nuggets, think about what are some like real meats that are easy to chew. So you're going to try slow cooker chicken, right?
Mhm.
Slow cooker pork where it's just falling apart.
Yeah.
If you're doing, if you're grilling something, you're going to cut it so small. And then try to watch and see like if they're struggling. If your kid is pocketing food in their cheek or holding it in their mouth, that's another sign too that they might just be struggling with the chewing and they need, some like not even very extensive, but just some quick oral therapy. Fix it
Yeah,
right
I
up.
mean, we've got lots of comments going in the Facebook group right now. Lindsay's like, I'd never thought it being because it's easier. Martine
Yeah.
saying my son will only eat meat that he doesn't have to chew, so I always did slow cooked food. April saying, yes, my daughter takes forever to eat because she just mulls on any soft food in her mouth. Any help? Sensory, she likes more crunchy foods like carrots and apples. So Facebook's going up right now. Everyone's blown away. So do you have any like suggestions for April? And she was saying that she just mulls any, soft food in her mouth. Is there any help that you can, give her there?
Yeah. You mean like she just like hangs on to it and just doesn't quite finish? I think mull would be like she's not really swallowing,
That's what
is my
I think
guess.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, in the SOS approach to feeding, which was revolutionary for my own training, they said
Mm-hmm.
like the earlier you can get feeding therapy, the better.
Yeah.
So that would be like a reference that maybe I'll come back and kind of drop their link because they have an amazing parent training video there. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you may be able, even if it's like just not too severe, you may be able to teach your kids how to chew at home too. And you
Yeah.
just like put a bite in your mouth and like chew really big and really impolite and show them how you're moving it and see if they can do it
Yeah. Because like,
and give them practice.
I mean, I've never taught my kids to chew ever.
Mm-mm.
Like I've never like who would know that we have to teach our kids to chew? We just think it's ingrained in us. So,
Yeah.
maybe it's just as simple of us going, maybe we need to teach them. So I think
Right. And
that's
it's one of those things where we may have just like missed a step, right? So maybe
Mhm.
like maybe you had pouches for too long where the kids were just like sucking on
Yeah.
purees too long and kind of getting that puree delivered a little too far back. Or maybe, maybe your kids didn't have like chew toys. Like you can give them a whole carrot too and let kids
Yeah.
kind of relearn to gnaw on a whole carrot because that initiates all the muscles and all the different parts of your mouth. Just like, I mean, that's what you would do like as a baby to
Yeah.
not have them choking on food, but yet they're jawing on things and moving stuff around. But
So
it totally
Renee,
could be tongue or teeth or lips, like again, 32 steps to eating.
yeah.
Um, yeah, if they're mulling on food and not swallowing, I wouldn't take too long before just checking with a feeding therapist or occupational therapist in your area.
For sure. Renee's asking, is bubblegum a good source of learning how to chew? That's a good question, Renee.
That is a good question. And I have to
Mhm.
say that wasn't really addressed in the SOS approach to feeding. I would say if you determine your child just has a weak chew, it's
Yeah.
probably not a bad idea. But I think a bubblegum habit like opens the door to other issues like over
Many other
salivating.
things.
So you don't
Yep.
want to do it. You don't want to do it too much.
Yeah, and we also want to find the bubble gum that doesn't have artificial flavors and artificial colors and things like that because we know that they exacerbate our kids with ADHD.
Mm.
So let's jump on to the next question. My child used to be such a great eater, and then they started disliking foods they used to like. What do I do?
This is so common, especially in like between the ages of 2 and 5.
Mm.
And I know most of your crowd is over 6, but I'm going to guess that for most of them, cutting foods from their repertoire happen between the ages of 2 and 5. And honestly, it's really developmentally appropriate because by about age 2, the child developmentally realizes that they're a separate being from their parent. And so it becomes their mission in life to figure out where the parent's control ends and where their control begins. So they're just going to push and push and push.
They are.
And so sometimes that means having really strong opinions about food, even if those opinions aren't even necessarily real. It could just be a little bit of that power struggle that we inadvertently create as parents. So a lot of helping kids open back up to foods that they used to dislike is removing the stress from the table. And so anytime we're saying you have to take one bite, you have to take 3 bites, you take 3 bites and you'll earn your dessert. You have to clear your plate before you leave the table. Like, these are all really common. And again, no guilt if you've said those phrases. I have as well. But when you know better, you do better. When you know better, you do better. And so from henceforward, if you can realize that it's really, really important that the child chooses what goes in their mouth, because here's the thing, we can't make our kids chew. We can't make their kids swallow. So if we insist on a bite going down into their stomach, we can't win. And they can't win. And we've created a power struggle where there's nothing but losers. And I hate that feeling. And I don't want you to have that feeling, right? Yeah. So we have to pull all the way back and not even create the power struggle. Yeah. So you choose what is served. You choose what you choose vegetables, great. You choose chicken nuggets, great. They choose how much they eat. Because if we force a bite, even one bite, we can't win that power struggle. So I would recommend requiring a bite on the plate, but not requiring a bite in the mouth. Totally different.
What does that mean?
It's a totally different balance of power. So we call it a taster bite. And so I'll ask my kids, do you want a taster or a serving of asparagus? That happens to be our side vegetable tonight. And 2 of my kids chose tasters, 2 chose servings. And so a taster bite means that 1 bite goes on the plate. And that's the end of the conversation.
Okay.
They don't have to clear that. They don't have to eat it before they're excused. They just need it on the plate. And that's just for the exposure of getting used to that food again. A lot of families find that when they remove that pressure to eat, the kids actually eat better because, right? Physiologically, when you're stressed, one of the things that stress shuts down in the body is your appetite.
Yep. Okay.
So if there's a power struggle at the table, you're feeling the stress, moms and dads. The kids are feeling the stress too. And it's shutting down their appetite. And it's inhibiting with their ability to have a good relationship with those vegetables. So it's super important to resist the temptation to force a bite. And then especially for those kids who are like ditching foods, we kind of want to make sure the kids aren't eating the same exact food every day.
Yes.
Because that's
one of my big things.
Yeah. That's called food jagging. And people will food jag, and we do it too as adults. And then you get tired of that food and you ditch it. Kids who are really struggling with eating are kind of true problem feeders, which is more likely to happen on the spectrum with our ADHD kids. You're just, unfortunately, sorry guys, a little more likely to have a picky eater or a problem feeder. The problem feeders might ditch those food jag foods forever.
Yeah. Until
there's a real intervention to get it back. So you can prevent the ditching of the foods by trying to prevent the food jags, as in every day, same food. And you can try to rehabilitate by decreasing the stress at the table.
Okay. And so if you decrease the stress at the table and then, they still don't eat, what do you do?
If they don't eat anything at dinner?
Well, if they, you put on, their chicken nuggets and you put on their asparagus and you put on, something else, and they don't touch the asparagus and they only have the chicken nuggets. And then that's what they do every night. You've removed that stress, but they're still not eating. What happened? Like, there will be some kids that will have that, really knuckle down. What do you do in that situation?
Well, first of all, you're not giving them the chicken nuggets every night, right?
Yes.
100%. We just talked about that. Yeah. So you do want to have a safe food on the table every night, but it should definitely rotate. Your kids are going to have multiple safe foods. And I mean, if you're really having a kid who literally only eats their safe foods every night, and after going through some processes, making sure snacks far enough away from dinner, leading with your ACE, trying to help your kid create a better relationship with food, it's possible you need feeding therapy, right? Which is not, that's not anything to say that like you failed. It just means that there are people who can really help using processes that I can't teach you in the next 4 minutes,
Yes.
in the next 5 minutes.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, you've got to remember that leading with your ace. I think that's probably like such an important tip. And I sort of talk about something similar to that in my program, where it's
Cool.
like, just give them a vegetable and before they get their meal, and explore it, see it, look at, take, that sort of thing. So I think that's a fantastic tip. Now, how do you get your kids to try new foods? And they might say ugh before they even try something. So what do you do?
Yeah. And this piggybacks really well on your last question about like helping kids make friends with the foods and leading with the ACE, decreasing the stress at the table.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to get our kids involved in the kitchen as well, because that is an environment where the pressure to eat is gone.
Yep.
Right? There's no pressure to eat. So for a little while, especially if your kids have felt pressure, whether it's real or perceived, right? Sometimes kids feel pressure just because there's food on their plate. And it's nothing even that you did as a parenting decision. But once you remove the child from the table and they're in the kitchen, there's no pressure to eat. So it's a wonderful way to get exposure to food, to get experience with those foods, kind of smell the smells. Hopefully they lick their fingers. I know that's gross, but it's really good for our picky eaters.
So good. Best part, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's a really powerful strategy, is to get the kids involved. It also opens a loop, right? Because we as human beings, like, we kind of don't like open loops. And when you're involved at the beginning of something, there's a little part of you that kind of wants to see it through and be involved at the end. We have a strategy in our family for those kids who are already at the table. You serve something you've worked on. And I mean, it's so button pushing, right? Parents, they're like, oh, gross, that looks disgusting. I had a mom tell me recently that every day her son, 8-year-old, walked in the kitchen, and he says, what stinks?
Oh, that is so funny. That reminds me of my 7-year-old. Every time he gets to the table, he's like, oh, gross, chicken again.
Yeah. So, I mean, it inflames you. She's like, I know I shouldn't take the bait, but it bothers me every night. So she started not responding.
Yeah.
And guess what? He started eating the stinky foods. So that's part of it, is like to put on our own poker face, but also we give our kids a phrase that they're allowed to say. And this is just straight parenting. This has nothing to do with food. It's just teaching your kids to be polite. and we tell our kids that you may say it's not your favorite after you taste it. And that is all.
Yeah.
Right. You just have to give them the words to say. So when they say, you explain it. This is how life is going to work from now on. In the Kimball family, we say it's not my favorite. And the next time they say, ew, gross, say, oh, you mean it's not your favorite? Right. We don't need to like clamp down on them right away. We're going to train them in this new habit. Oh, you mean it's not your favorite? Yeah. Okay,
I
cool.
like that one. And
then after a while, you can clamp down. And we don't say ew, gross in this house. We say it's not my favorite. Much more polite.
I tell you, I am going to be taking that one as soon as we finish up here, and we're going to be having dinner. And I know that my 7-year-old is going to. I know what the dinner is. We're having chicken lettuce cups that we made, and every time we have it, he's like, yuck! I don't like chicken lettuce cups. I am taking that tip. So thank you, Katie.
Good. And you're supposed to. And another great phrase is, I haven't learned to like that yet.
Ooh, I like that one.
Very growth mindset. Yeah.
Yes, I do like that one for sure. Now, this is a big one, and I would love to know the answer because I just have no idea. Do you give dessert if they don't eat their dinner?
Okay, let's just let that one sit for a minute, because all the parents are going, I don't know. I know. I hate dessert topics. They're my least favorite because I'm still not quite sure if I'm doing it right. But let me lay out a scenario for you.
Okay.
You're going to get a reward, Donna. You're going to get $1,000 for running a 5K. Are you going to work hard to run your 5K?
I am going to work very, very hard to run my 5K.
Do you think you will love running?
No,
not necessarily. No, because when we give you a reward, that makes the thing you have to do to get to the reward the drudgery, right?
Yeah.
So if you eat your dinner, you get dessert.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay.
When dessert is the trophy, dinner is the drudgery.
Interesting.
Bummer. So if we set it up, if we set up the system that way, and I've done it not too many years ago, we were still doing that. You got to finish your dinner and then you can have dessert.
Yeah.
When
I'm
we
one
set
of
it
them
up that way,
too.
it
Yeah.
elevates the sweets. It makes them the desired thing, which is kind of the opposite of what I want my kids to do.
Okay. So what do you do? Like, tell me. I'm on
So
the edge
I
of
have a
my seat.
7-year-old too. My 7-year-old's
Yep.
in first grade. And today he came in the kitchen at 5:15. I was making dinner and he said, "Can I have a dessert?" I said, "No, it's not eating time yet. You're bored. Go find something to do." And he left and he came back at 5:30 and he said, "Can I choose my dessert and put it on the table for eating time?" I said, "Fine. Yes, you may do that." Because anytime it's eating time, snack time, breakfast, lunch, dinner,
Yeah.
my kids can have their one sweet treat or one dessert of the day. So he
Oh, so
had
they
his
get one
candy
a
corn,
day. Yeah.
one a day.
Okay.
So they have to budget their dessert. And that, by the way, that may or may not be the best system. There are other picky eating experts who will say, "What, just let them have whatever, whenever, whatever you choose to serve." I don't know. We've chosen one a day. But the point is my 7-year-old had his little bag of candy corn that he earned at school for being good, because that's clearly a great system. His little bag of candy corn next to his spaghetti squash with turkey sausage and asparagus. And he went back and forth. Right. So he's got that habit down, that the dessert doesn't have to be at the end of the meal. It doesn't have to be the trophy that you only get after you cross the finish line. And so he's able to actually like go say, "Well, I'm done with my candy corn. Can I have more spaghetti squash? Because I'm still hungry." And so that's what it looks like when you take the onus off dessert. So yes, my kids do get dessert if they don't eat their dinner. If I'm serving the portion, it might be smaller. Just because I don't really like giving them a lot of sugar if they don't have some fat and protein to even out that blood sugar. But it's not a reward system.
Interesting. I know it's like where I talk to a lot of families and they're like, breakfast, for example, it doesn't need to be cereal. It doesn't need to be toast. It can be anything. You can have dinner for breakfast. You can have breakfast for dinner. And so, you make a really good point. Dessert doesn't need to be at the end of a meal. It doesn't need to be that trophy. That's like, honestly, that's, amazing. And, giving them that one time a day, I think that's great. I mean, like, we've got a lot of comments, Lindsay's saying another great tip, budgeting dessert. I love the budgeting dessert. So
it gives them self-control, right? So like they have to sort of learn self-discipline. They have to learn planning. My little guy might want his dessert right after school, at after school snack, but he has to say, are we going to have ice cream after dinner? Right? Is there anything special going on today?
Yeah. Totally. Like building all these skills that have absolutely nothing to do with eating as well.
Nothing to do with food. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, this is an interesting one, and I do it because this is, a good way to get, some nutrition in. But should we be hiding veggies in smoothies and other dishes to trick our kids into nutrition?
Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm like in a shift right now, because I've always taught people, no, don't hide things. And then I just did some interviews at my last No More Picky Eating Challenge, and the experts were like, anytime that the kids are getting, eating the food, it's going to build their gut bacteria that enjoy that vegetable, and then it will cause them to crave that vegetable more. And I'm like, oh, so we should hide the food. So it's a yes and like, no, do not lie to your children.
Not lying.
Because they will catch you and then the trust is broken, right?
Yeah.
So I do think it's really important that the kids have an opportunity to know what's in there, right?
Yeah.
So if they ask, you gotta tell them, right? But apparently, and literally just learned this 3 weeks ago, apparently there actually is some pretty good science behind getting some bits and pieces of different vegetables into your kids, even if it's not training their taste buds, it's training their gut bacteria, which is fascinating.
I mean, and I talk about it all the time. I mean, especially with kids with ADHD, gut-brain connection is huge. We want to feed that gut as much as possible. But agree with you, like, let's put the stuff in the smoothie. They might not notice, but if they ask, then don't lie. Maybe that's a good hybrid of between. I make meat sauce a lot. I do a big batch of meat sauce. I put, zucchini, I put dino kale, I put carrots, I put celery, all blended in there. They've never once, like, I do that a lot. My oldest son is 12 years old, and I have been doing that for years. They have never once asked me, like, is there anything other than meat and, tomato sauce in here? And so, I haven't lied because they've never asked me.
That's too funny. And that's where getting kids involved in the kitchen really helps too, because
Mm-hmm.
they know what's going in there. They see it and then they taste it and they're like, oh, so that's kind of the next step is like, what would happen, Donna, if your kids helped you put all those veggies in, I'm assuming a blender,
Yep.
and they get to push the buttons because buttons are cool and noise is cool.
Amazing.
And so then they're like, oh, we've been eating this for years. Maybe I like zucchini. Now we're like connecting it to like your academic brain.
Yep.
The curtain is pulled back. Oh, maybe I like zucchini. Maybe I do like dino kale. That's cool.
Yeah, love
Hopefully
it.
it could go any which way. Parenting's a gamble, friends, but
Oh, it is. It is. And I say that often, it's like, even if you've got kids with challenges or you don't have kids with any challenges, parenting is tough. It is. It's just like, and no one tells us about it when we decide to be parents, but, it's just the way it's going to be. Now, this is an interesting question, and it's funny. It makes me think of my husband's brother. So
okay.
my husband's brother, like, takes like forever to eat. And he's a 45-year-old man. And he's just always the one that, everyone's finished and he's still there and he's eating away literally 30 minutes after everyone else is finished. So, it's probably a little bit different to a child, but what if your kid does take forever to eat dinner? You have to like constantly keep reminding them to sit down and focus, and it's exhausting. How can you help that? Like, how can you help them eat in a more timely fashion?
So I am very much deeply connected to this question because literally tonight, what do we have? Spaghetti squash, asparagus, broccoli salad, cabbage salad. I had all my salads left when my entire family left the table. I'm sitting there, I put my feet up, I was eating my salad. I got a little helping of second helpings, and I'm like, everyone's cleaning up. That's cool. So I get it. Sometimes the kids who take too long to eat are chatty. That's me. Sometimes, it could mean that they do have some trouble chewing and swallowing. My brother-in-law, just like yours, turns out he had like his throat was too small. At age 40, he had to have surgery to stretch his throat and he could finally eat chicken. It's not about the food when people are taking too long, generally, unless even if you're in a power struggle of you have to eat this before you leave the table, that can take forever, but that's about the power struggle. It's not about the food. It could be about the chewing. It could be about the chatting.
Yeah.
It could be about the distractibility. So, I mean, there's a couple of things to do. First of all, is it interfering with family life? If it's not, you might just want to let them take a while to eat, because most likely at school they had 11.2 minutes to eat.
Yes.
And maybe they're really hungry. And we need to celebrate the fact that, holy cow, perhaps they're chewing well, which is going to help their digestion, right? So if it's not interfering with family life and you can handle it, and they're actually sitting and they're actually eating, maybe you let it ride, right? Your brother-in-law has made it to 45 and he's a successful adult. And I still, kids who take a long time to eat can be successful.
Totally.
If it's interfering with family life, or if the root cause of taking forever is because they're not even at the table, right? They're leaving all the time. Well, now you probably need an intervention strategy. So a good rule for many families is when you leave the table, you're done. Yeah. That's how you're excused. And that will cause tears and meltdowns for a couple of days. But I always say try 3 to 5 days, depending on the stubbornness level of your child. You only need to be one level higher on the stubborn meter, parents, and you're adults and you can do this. You set a system, you weather the trouble for 3 to 5 days. And if you're really consistent that when the child leaves the table, the plate also leaves the table and can't come back until your next eating opportunity, which is at least 90 minutes away, it won't take very long until they learn.
It's so true. If we think back to like when our kids were like little mini ones and we were, maybe doing a bit of sleep training or whatever, consistency is the key. And it's the key for everything. It's the key for, parenting. If you try positive parenting strategies and you do it a couple of times and then you don't do it, it's not going to work. So consistency is the key, no matter what you do. And I love that 90 minutes, actually. I love that. Okay. So this is our eating window. You can choose to eat or not, but you're not going to eat again 90 minutes. Now, I want to ask you this question. And so, for example, like we eat dinner at about, 6:15, 6:30. My kids are a little bit older now. Before it was like always 5:00. I still feel weird doing dinner at like 6:30. I still feel like I'm in that like early 5:00 stage. But what happens? So like my boys, both of them go to bed at 8:00, and I'm like completely pulling this one out of, I'm sorry if I'm like talking, or, you haven't had any time to prepare, but we eat dinner at 6:30 and they finish, or they not finish and they leave the table, and like dinner's like, you can't eat again for 90 minutes, but they've got to go to bed before that. And then the little one, it's my little one. It's the 7-year-old, and he doesn't have ADHD. It's the older one. The 7-year-old gets into bed. I'm hungry, but he's had dinner, and we haven't given a snack because it's bedtime. He's taking too long for dinner. What do you do? Do you just do you give him food at that time? Do you just say, well, you didn't eat enough dinner? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, two options. One is, breakfast is going to taste so good.
Ooh, I like
because
it.
You're already hungry. That's wonderful, darling. Good night. Light off, close the door, right? That's definitely option one.
Yeah.
If you've got a kid, because a lot of parents come to me and say, even my 6 and 7-year-old, they're waking up at 3 a.m.
No way.
Hungry. Oh, it happens. Now that is disrupting family life and the parents' sleep. It's got to stop. So
totally.
That's when you say, if you are genuinely hungry, you may eat dinner and only dinner. It can't be a fun snack. It can't be a munchy crunchy that's desirable. It is literally, wow, you made a bad choice at dinner, but I see this is really affecting your body.
Yep.
So you can have a little bit of dinner, right? Hopefully before they're actually physically in bed. So that'd be the two options. And it's really just like, what's working. For our runners, Donna, I got to tell you 2 more really fascinating reasons that kids might leave the table. One is because they're seriously afraid of the food on their plate.
Oh, no.
Okay. If there's some food on their plate that they're unfamiliar with and it's freaking them out, or if they're a visual over processor, right? Their sensory processing visually is running kind of high, and they see that food and they're freaking out. If they're not allowed to move the food away from themselves, they move themselves away from the table.
Really?
So if you're getting a sense that it might be just like a freaking out about the food on their plate, provide a little discard plate where they're allowed to move their food away from themselves so they don't have to move themselves away from the table. So that can be one thing that's going on. The other thing that can be going on is that perfect eating posture is all 90-degree angles. Your waist, your knees, your ankles.
Get up right now.
And if you picture, right. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't slouch at all, but here's the thing. If you were a child sitting in the chair you are sitting in now, Donna, would your feet touch the ground?
No.
Which means your body is going to be working a little bit to make sure you feel stable. My 10-year-old, when he was like 8, is the first time I encountered Dr. Kay Toomey, who teaches the SOS approach to feeding. She's fantastic. Yeah. And immediately I thought she's talking about him, because he'll put one leg down on the floor.
Wow.
And put his other little butt cheek up on the adult sized chair, because he's stabilizing himself. Because if you feel like you're going to fall, you can't focus on eating.
You have just blown my mind. Seriously. And
it's not me. I just learned from the best, but isn't that crazy? So if you notice that your kids are just fidgeting and they're trying to put a foot on the ground, or like they would rather stand up at the table, it's the chair. You need the right size chair.
Seriously, like I think you've just solved my 7-year-old's problem, because he's up, down, and he's the one that doesn't have ADHD. But we've got stools and we've got we've got our kitchen island, and he sits. I bet he can't touch the foot bar to stabilize himself.
Nope. Try a little kid table, or you can buy chairs that can even go up to bar height, that you can adjust every time your kid grows an inch. You can adjust the footrest and you can adjust the back. They're called Trip Trap chairs, and there's other brands. Yeah. But if it's causing a problem, it's worth it to fix it.
Totally. Katie,
it's cool, right?
Seriously. Like, when are you coming back? Because you just like revolutionized my life right now.
But notice it's not about the food.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with it, does it?
No.
Okay.
So it's not that you're cooking the wrong things. It's just that something else is going on in the kids' relationship with their space, their bodies, their mouths, or sometimes us. It happens.
Totally. Oh my gosh. You've totally blown my mind. I'm going to jump over to Facebook and see if there's any other questions. I got most of them, but guys, if you're listening in, and I know there's a number of you listening in, but if you're listening in, drop your questions. I've got a couple here. So April was asking, how do you get them to eat if no dessert as reward? I mean, even dessert doesn't work, just a power struggle. My daughter doesn't sit still and constantly gets up all the time and gets distracted easily if they don't want to eat what's for dinner. Every night is such a struggle to get her to sit down and just eat dinner.
Mm-hmm. And well, you just said it, April, is the dessert's not working anyway.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So ditch that. And any power struggle, if you're requiring bites, that's a power struggle. Nobody wins. I really believe that everyone can win the game of dinner. Parents can win, the kids can win, and the farmers who grow the food can win because we're going to buy their vegetables, right? Everybody wins. Yeah. So it's a big, it's not a quick fix. It's a big process. Question one is your daughter hungry enough? Mm-hmm. If her snack is too big or too close to dinner, it's absolutely sabotaging everything else you're doing. Right. 100%. Got to have an appetite. And again, ADHD meds put a kink in this because that artificially suppresses the appetite. Totally stinks. Yeah. It makes your job harder for sure. Mm-hmm. And then you can look at the chair. Sometimes I would let my kids stand on a balance board at the table so that they could be wiggly, or just stand at the table so that they were rooted, and see if that made a difference rooting, before you figure out the chair that does the 90-90-90, Yeah. So they've got to have an appetite. They've got to be comfortable and safe. They've got to be able to chew. It's worth watching if the kids are, like I said, pushing food against the top of their mouth, pocketing food in their cheeks. There's a lot of different ways to watch your child's mouth and see if they're really chewing or if they're like rabbit nibbling on the front teeth, and then you work on that good relationship with food, removing the pressure to eat. They won't believe it for a while. So it's not a one-day fix. You have to remove the pressure to eat for multiple days in a row until your kids actually experience like, whoa, mom didn't make me eat. Huh, that's weird. It takes some time for them to believe that it's real. And actually, okay, one last tip. No, because we can't fix all the problems, but one last tip would be to go with smaller servings, because sometimes those big plops of food on the plate are just freaking intimidating. And the child's brain says, you're going to have to eat that all. You're going to have to eat that all. That's crazy. I'm freaking out, So little bites. I call it a polka dot plate. You could try it tomorrow. Everything that's being served, one bite is their first serving. Oh, and you see what happens. That. It's less intimidating.
It's so true, because, and I think Alicia's watching, and I'm going to use her daughter as an example, but Alicia's daughter she's in our program, and she's doing a protocol because we found stuff going on in her body that's contributing to her symptoms, and so she's doing a number of supplements, and a number of those supplements are in the morning, and her daughter started hiding them under, like, I don't know if it was the napkin or whatever it was. And her mum's like, well, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, was it her? No, actually, it might not be Alicia. It was someone else. Anyway, and they're like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, well, just seeing all of those in a pile was just too overwhelming for me. So I put it under the thing. I had a couple at a time. I ate some more breakfast. I had a couple more and I ate more breakfast. It wasn't Alicia's mom, so Alicia's daughter. So sorry, just got it confused. But I know it was Kim's daughter. But I thought that was, really, really interesting. And I suppose it's very, very similar with food.
Yeah. Anything that looks like really hard work. Gosh, that little girl was so perceptive. How smart is she? Wow.
Totally. We didn't even see it as parents. Like, we don't even think like, oh, well, that's a lot. Maybe we should just do some now and then some a little bit, in a little bit. So I thought that was very, very perceptive. So April is asking, she always wants snacks. How many hours before dinner should I cut off snacks?
Right. I call it MS 91 and done. Meal and snack at least 90 minutes apart, one snack between each set of meals, one serving of snack, done.
Okay.
That's
But
how
what
I
do
do
you
it.
do when your kid goes to the kitchen like this? Again, my poor 7-year-old, he's like really the example right now. You know, he goes in, he like literally like we come in there and the kitchen's a mess and he's made all these concoctions of like, which is experimental. I mean, he's experimenting with food, which is amazing. But what do you do like if the kitchen's closed, but you know, you can't put like tape around everything?
Right. Well, and I mean, I teach kids to cook, and so that warms my heart that he's trying to make things.
Yes.
But you know, what do we do when our kid wants to run into the road? What do we do when they try to cross the road without looking both ways? What do we do when they try to ride the bike without a helmet? Like, you've used parenting strategies in the past. So the point is that kids need boundaries. Okay. They feel unsafe if they have way too many choices and no boundaries at all. So we make the boundaries on the time during which eating is appropriate. So like in our house, snack time during the summer, when the kids are all home, snack time is between 9:30 and 10:30 in the morning. And it's between 3:30 and 4:30 in the afternoon. And I will tell you, our Google Home actually announces it because my husband got tired of the kids asking, when is snack?
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Amazing.
Every day it announces snack time. And then you've got an hour to eat and that's it. And now the kitchen is closed. And so if it was my son making food, I would say, that is amazing. I would love you to make a snack for the next eating opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. So they can make it.
Love it.
But not just like consume it all the time. And kids love science too. So here's the science behind that, right? Is that we have a system of digestion from the top to the bottom. And if the top is busy, the bottom can't do its job. So for good digestion, you need 90 minutes where your mouth is quiet. Your mouth doesn't have food. So your digestion can work really well and use the nutrients you've given it. So we got to give a rest.
Okay, I am totally doing that with and I'm not going to say her name, but the Echo. We've got that around our house as well. So I'm totally implementing that strategy. I love it because, it is amazing. Well, Katie, I mean, I don't want to take up any more of your evening. It's probably getting very late where you are, but I appreciate you so much for joining me today. And I think I can speak for all of us and say that we have like gleaned so much information from you and how to help our picky eaters. Now, if anyone's listening today and need some extra support, you can reach out to Katie. I'm going to drop some links in the comments below. You can get on Katie's email list and, you know, she shares so much good information. I'm going to drop a link to that. I'm also going to put it in the, you know, in the intro of the Facebook Live, but we are, you know, she'll be happy to, I've got one more question. Can I, do you have time?
Well, I'm too curious what the question is. So now I have to read it.
What do you suggest for school snacks? My son won't eat at school and won't take lunch. And that's from Esther.
He won't eat at school and won't eat lunch?
Yeah, won't eat lunch.
Oh, that's
well,
tricky.
Firstly, I've got to ask, Esther, is your son on medication? Because, you know, maybe that is a reason why. But I'm not sure if
I mean, children do need to be involved, right? We don't want to give them all the choices and no boundaries, but having some agency helps kids feel good about things. So it sounds like, to me, it sounds like, Esther, a time to really sit down with your son and say, what's going on? Like, is it the food? It could be that there's too much going on, that he's like sensorily overstimulated and he can't focus on his food. That, you know, that's a long day. If he's genuinely not eating from like 8 to 3 or 7 to 4 or whatever your school day is,
I know.
It's time to have a real serious conversation and like, how can we make this work? And if it means talking with the teacher and getting him into a quiet space, you know, if it means changing up the food that is packed, or he doesn't like hot lunch, or he wishes he had hot lunch, there's got to be a solution there. But good point. If the medication is artificially suppressing the appetite, that is so hard.
Yeah. Well, she's just said that he's not on medication. He's been having trouble going to school. He's scared and he feels that the work is too hard. Oh, that's such a tough situation to be in.
Yep.
Look, honestly, I think that firstly, you probably want to look at what's going on in the body. And a lot of that, I find, like, I've got a lot of families that come to me that their kids' body is in a state of inflammation, and we really, really need to reduce that inflammation. And once that happens, the whole nervous system calms down, and they're more open to things, they're more open to going school. But as Katie said, I think talking to the teacher and getting him into a quiet spot to help him eat lunch is critical, because you'll probably find that if he doesn't eat all day, he'll come home, wow, like he's probably going to be extremely hangry. There's probably going to be meltdowns. There's going to be all of that. And that's so tough on you as mama, and also on him. So, but what about some good snacks? Like she was, what school snacks do you suggest?
Sure. I mean, for a kid who's not in that deep anxiety and has an appetite, we always talk about fat and protein.
Yeah.
I want snacks to be satiating. I want the energy to last. And so we're talking about, nuts and seeds, if they can be handled, maybe rolled into little balls with the dried fruit. You can make like a homemade Larabar. And actually on the link that Donna will share with you, we've got a whole 8-page printout or handout of different snacks, and they're separated into like high fat, high protein, high fiber. And there is some gluten and dairy in there. So you kind of have to filter that through the diet that your child needs that will serve them best. Yeah. But yeah. And man, cutting out dairy is so hard, because that's like the easy fat protein. Yeah. Right. The cheese and yogurt. So that does get hard, but there are really well-sourced meat sticks out there. You can make a really fun
Paleo Valley. It's like one of my favorite. There's so much protein and fat that you can get outside the dairy. And I've talked about it before in the group, so definitely they can find that. But definitely get on Katie's email list, and that snack guide, I'm like going on there. I haven't actually downloaded it myself, because I'm going to go on there and I'm going to steal some things from you. But hopefully that helps Esther. Now, as I said, if anyone needs that additional support, you'll be able to reach out to Katie using the links that we'll provide you in the comments. But Katie, amazing. When can you come back?
Oh, well, we will schedule something, but I just want everyone to know that you're so not alone. Like every struggle that you shared with me today, not that you're not a unique individual and lovely in your own right, but like promise other parents are dealing with the same thing and have dealt with it and have gotten through it.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So I get to work with people over time and hear the picky eating struggles and then hear the successes. And my favorite one, like generally when we do a challenge, which will be coming up in February, 80% or more of parents say, I felt less stress at the table in just 5 days. That's huge. Even if your kid doesn't touch a vegetable, feeling less stress is huge. Yeah.
Okay. So guys, you need to click on the link that I'm going to put below, because you won't know about the challenge that's going to come up in February if you don't. So like that's an extra bonus to get on her list, download that guide, and be on the list so you know when that challenge and what's involved in that challenge, Katie. Like,
well, we move
free challenge or what?
It is. Yeah. It's a free 5-day challenge. And we just move step by step through kind of the big overview of our process, starting with getting those snacks dialed in, starting with how do you lead with your ACE? How do you actually make that work? And I give one action step every day. And when parents follow that process, they see big results.
Yay. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, Katie, thank you so much. Guys, that's it for tonight. I can't hold up Katie anymore. It is like probably, are you on Eastern time, Katie?
Yeah, it's pushing 9 o'clock.
Oh my God.
I'm a night owl.
Let you go. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've got any questions, Katie's actually in the group. And so pop your questions on there. Like she'll come back and she'll answer them. And we're going to pop the links to her programs directly after this. But guys, thanks so much for tuning in. This was so fantastic. And can't wait to have you back, Katie. So thank you.
Cool. You're very welcome.
Thanks.